Let's talk Jets football. One more show before the season begins. It's Monday, September 5th. So by Monday, September 12th, the first game of the season will be in the books. Thank goodness. Enough of the draft and free agency and winning the offseason and not losing our preseason game. And who cares? Get all that stuff out of the way. Let's start some regular season football on Sunday.
Yep. 3 days to opening night on, obviously Thursday night with, I believe, Amazon this year, which is going to be interesting. We'll see how quickly people adapt to the new medium to try to watch things as opposed to, we've adapted to NFL Network, we've adapted to others. So I'm assuming Amazon Prime will be something people will be able to
What do we
eventually.
have? We have what game is that? Jacksonville?
Think so.
That's a Thursday night towards the end of the season, I believe. So
yeah,
long way to go
yep.
before, by
very long way to go by then.
Hopefully that'll be a game that means something. Okay, so we haven't talked since cut down day, so a lot to talk about, including our preseason forecast, our season forecast. So I'm going to take a look at our notes of what we talked about before camp and what we thought that needed to happen, and some of the things, competitions and who to step up and all that other stuff. So first of all, we said there would be a battle between Yeboah and Wesco for the final tight end. Well, Yeboah signed to the practice squad, so I guess he beat out Wesco. We did not expect Cager, so that was really a pleasant surprise is Lawrence Cager's development, and they seem to say that he's doing fine at this point as far as run blocking, and that's real important because you can't just call him a tight end and have him run routes. He's got to learn to block. So then it becomes somebody that you just can't. All right, I don't know what he's going to do. Is he going to actually stay in or not? That was really nice. It's a nice story to see Cager looking so good because we liked him when he first came out, and we were kind of high on him as a sleeper a couple years ago.
Yeah, but we were rejecting him obviously like everybody else then because he was a wide receiver. So the transition to tight end, as you said, the key is blocking. Clearly can catch the ball since he transitioned from a wide receiver, but that the inline blocking, the ability to pass protect if need be, all that is components of being an effective tight end. And nice to see that transition. I think Wesco ended up in Chicago, if I remember correctly. So he's one of the 7 that that they cut that ended up signing off waivers pretty quickly with other teams. So Wesco goes, Yeboah is back again. Seems to be a standard on the practice squad the last couple of seasons, it looks like. But we talked about the depth in the room beforehand, right? Is signing CJ Uzomah, signing Conklin, drafting Record. So they now have some pretty, what we would hope, solid depth at tight end, which has been a position of need over the last several seasons.
And we talked about that, especially last season, how big a position this is for this style of offense. And not having a receiving tight end was a big issue, especially for a young quarterback like Zach. Did not allow him that opportunity. Now they have it in spades. This is the deepest tight end room I think I've ever seen with the New York Jets. They may not have an elite number 1 that we've seen before, but this is clearly the deepest.
Oh. Yeah, well, I go back to watching Castor and Barkham as a little kid, and reading about them. So to me, that'll always be the deepest room. But again, in terms of having two guys who legitimately can be starters in this league, they have that now in Uzomah and Conklin.
Okay, now the place kicking job went to Zerline over Pinheiro. Pinheiro hasn't been picked up, has he?
I think he has. Did he end up in? I thought it was Carolina because they had an injury.
I don't know.
There's a team that had an injury that ended up signing him, so he ended up landing somewhere.
So Zerline is now the guy. The only thing, and this is what we talked about last time, is that he has to stay healthy. That's the trick, because if he gets hurt, we're right back where we started from, and that's not good. Keep in mind, Zerline, one of the reasons he was such an effective kicker early in his career is that he had a strong leg, deep leg. He has 38 career 50-yard or 50-plus field goal attempts that he has made over his career. And by the way, while that's good, he's only made 5 of the last 14 kicks from 50 or longer. So that's something. But again, you might throw in the fact that he hasn't been completely healthy. We certainly hope that's the case. He's still one of the top 10 kickers in the league. If he's healthy, we got to keep him healthy. And that's kind of, the deal that we've been stressing all offseason is keeping players healthy. So how confident are you in Greg Zuerlein when he lines up to make a key field goal? You feeling pretty good?
I mean, again, look, the nickname Greg the Leg was given to him for a particular reason, right? He still has a strong leg. As you said, the issue and the difficulty with him has been staying fully healthy and staying on the field. As of now, he has that, so there's no reason not to have confidence. Talk to me if he misses a 47-yard field goal in a key moment, then I may have a different viewpoint. But on the face of it, we said before, and I thought Zuerlein was going to beat up Pinheiro, so I'm not surprised that this happened. They brought him in for a specific reason, given that they felt that he was an upgrade. And unfortunately, the Jet kicking situation has been a revolving door for the last 7 years. Some stability there would be nice. I mean, getting rid of Jason Myers proved to be a really stupid move, and losing Nick Folk years ago also was a move that probably could have been remediated. So hopefully you have some stability now in somebody who's has a solid history of being a solid place kicker in the NFL, and hopefully he fills that role now for the Jets, who, nothing's worse than missing a makeable field goal on a team that, not doesn't has tremendous playoff aspirations, but you would hope you get a surprise win or two, and those surprise win or twos can come down to making a late kick to give a team a win that was unexpected.
Speaking of health, that was the number one. There was no second place wasn't even close. It was number one issue for the New York Jets this offseason, and is still going to continue into the regular season, at least in September. I believe that if they can get out of September pretty good, I think they're going to be, most teams usually are okay. I think we normally see injuries pile up on bad teams. Like if you're not a good team, and I just think it's just, I don't know whether or not it's psychological or whether or not it's, hey, you know what? I don't really feel good. This team sucks. I want a paycheck. So there's a lot that goes on in there. But I think if the Jets wind up being pretty healthy through September, I think that's going to bode well the rest of the season. Players are still going to get hurt, but nothing like what we've seen over the last couple of years. This team cannot afford those types of injuries. And it's going to be nice to see Carl Lawson out there, at least for a game, hopefully for more than that. And LaMarcus Joyner. Those were a couple of key guys that we wanted to make sure we're going to be healthy when the season began. And then we also talked about Nasruddin and Sherwood. Not only their development, but them keeping healthy. Well, Sherwood, of course, is still healthy. He made the team, but Nasruddin did not. Were you surprised about that?
Mildly. I mean, we talked a lot about, and we'll get to the secondary also, there was a lot of bodies in camp. And one of the key questions, which I don't think has fully been answered, is whether or not Douglas would weigh players that he drafted higher than players who might have been here otherwise. I mean, we saw that in 2020. We saw that in 2021 a little bit. A couple of guys who they got rid of surprised me based upon that fact. A couple of guys they kept surprised me. I mean, Nasruddin, look, he had an okay camp, not a great camp. There's a lot of guys who they brought in. I mean, there's a couple of guys who made the team that we didn't expect to make the team. Parks being one of them, and Tony Adams being other one.
Well, Parks is on the practice squad too.
Right, but I'm saying is these are guys who ended up being part of the 53 plus that we didn't
that's
expect
a good thing.
Originally going into camp. And we've also said that what this does evidence to a certain extent is the uplift in talent on the team from years past. Right, in years past, these guys would have been solid, locks to make the team because there wasn't a lot of talent around them. And not that they're an elite squad by any stretch of the imagination, but it's clear over the last 18 months there's been a significant uptick in the amount of talent that exists on this roster overall.
I think it's disappointing just for the fact that you wanted it to develop. You wanted him to become the player that they envisioned. And the fact that they left him exposed, even though he's back on the practice squad, that's the only thing that's disappointing. Sherwood still here, so we'll see what happens there. Well,
it's not only exposed, right? It's exposed and not signed by somebody, right? That's one thing if you don't have the room to sign him. It's another thing if you make it through 30 plus other teams and nobody else decides to pick you up and you end up back on the practice squad in the place where you started, right? You look at the 7 they got rid of and the 11 overall since camp started. They landed roles elsewhere, which means that teams felt that the talent level that they brought was significant enough to be part of their team, and they didn't make it all the way through waivers. Here, You've made it all the way through waivers from every other team, and now you're landing back in the spot where you were originally, which is not necessarily a bad thing in every instance, but clearly doesn't bode well for you having taken that next step in your career that another team wanted to take a chance on you.
Okay, and then, by the way, right now there's only 5 linebackers on the team, even though really you could say 4 because Marcel Harris is a special teamer. That's the reason why he's on this team. Just like Justin Hardy is part of the secondary, but he's a special teamer.
Mm-hmm.
So Harris and Hardy are really the only 2, I believe, special teamers on the team. Unless they believe Tony Adams is more of a, I don't know what they believe in Tony Adams. Is Tony Adams here because he's going to play in the secondary? Or is Tony Adams here because they feel like he's more of a special teamer / we'll throw him in there for a few snaps on defense. We'll find out week 1 if he even is active. Okay, so we talked about who needed a big camp. Some of those draft picks you talked about. Zuniga, P. Ryan, and Mims. And only one of them had a big camp. And that was Mims. That's why he's still here. P. Ryan is not. Zuniga is not. So what did you think about that? I was not for me, I was kind of disappointed in a way that P. Ryan did not get more of an opportunity. I understand it's been a deep backfield. But hey, look, they feel like Zonovan Knight is already past them. And that's a draft pick for Joe Douglas. So, okay, I guess they saw something that we didn't. Okay. And Zuniga, he had more than enough chances as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, when Bam Knight had a big camp, we knew that P. Ryan's number was potentially
especially
up. Especially
because of his kick returning. That was the killer. Because he's going to be, in my opinion, back there definitely as the number 1A kick returner, something P. Ryan is not capable of doing.
Hello. Yeah, I mean, we thought P. Ryan's was at risk. And we said in advance that like before the cut down day that he was at risk. He landed somewhere. So clearly there's somebody else who thinks he's got talent, but we knew he was running up against the numbers game, right? And we knew that when you brought in Breece Hall last year and when you had Michael Carter already as your 1-2, and then you had Knight and you had a 4th, that P. Ryan was at risk. He didn't have a bad camp either, right? I thought he had a pretty decent camp overall. If I remember correctly, he scored in one of the games as well in preseason, right? You thought might have given him a shot, but clearly Knight did enough, and you have the other 2 guys that you have to feed the ball to, and they said, you know what? We're going to start wiping the slate clean of certain guys just because we're upgrading the talent level, and we think that the guys we've brought in are better than maybe some of the incumbents who've been here, even if they're ones who were drafted in the first year by Douglas. But P. Ryan was one of those guys who was at risk, and clearly that he got the tap on the shoulder from Turk in terms of telling him his number was clearly up on cutdown day.
As far as the running back situation is concerned, we might as well also stick there. And I know even though we've been doing this for a very long time, and you and I have been doing this for several years, some of the new viewers maybe didn't get our little back and forth last week with Ty Johnson. So let's kind of recap. Okay. So Ty Johnson, I being a big college football guy, I saw how explosive he was in college. Figured, hey, this is an interesting guy. He's got a lot of speed. He was drafted late by Detroit. And I was shocked that Detroit did not keep him. That's why that old regime is gone, by the way, in Detroit, because they decided to keep like a 38-year-old Adrian Peterson over Ty Johnson. That's why they're gone. So Jets easily picked him up because of their waiver situation. Great pickup, I thought. Let's see what he has. We're a bad team. He should be able to possibly contribute. Let's see. I'm excited about giving this kid a chance on a bad team. I saw enough going into last year that I kind of feel he is what he is. He's not as good as I thought he could be, but he is what he is, and he's a good serviceable backup, somebody that could do a lot of little things for your team. I would not have been surprised if they cut him and kept LaMichael P. Ryan, but again, I think maybe they felt that he did a little bit more all around in his game, especially receiving things of that nature than P. Ryan was going to be able to give. So in that respect, I guess I'm not too surprised. I still kind of feel at this point, though, he's not going to be the running back I thought he could be. But you know what? He's a nice part of the team. That's all.
Okay. I mean, so the interesting part, we've talked about it a couple of times. You said it right with Nassau, you said it now with Johnson. The question becomes is clearly last year was the first year of the new regime. Do you give any issue or credence to the fact that have they developed players that they needed to? Have they properly developed players to get them to play to their potential? Or is it something where because it's a new regime that there hasn't been sufficient enough time for them to do that? That the old regime, especially under Gase, didn't do a good job of player development, right? I would think from what we've seen so far, there are positive signs in the right direction for the team, but clearly there's a lot more that we need to see to get those players to get to that next level.
Yeah, I think because you only had a couple, 3 years with Gase, but only a couple of years. What was it? How long was it Gase? Gase 3 years?
I think so. I think if I
Goes by
remember
so
correctly.
quick. So I don't know if he had 2 or 3.
Not quick enough in some
Yeah, I
respects
know.
either.
But anyway, bottom line is with Joe Douglas, the fact is that when you're going from Gase to the Saleh regime, yeah, it isn't a lot of time because you're changing coaches, and so yeah, and you're also trying to get it right, and that's why not only is the head coach gone, but if you thought some of those assistants were doing a good job, you retain them. They didn't retain many of those guys from the Gase staff, so a couple, but not most of them. So yeah, I look at it as more of it's got to be the player. That's why Mims is still here, because look, if they did not sign Garrett, if they did not draft Garrett Wilson, and let's say there was an injury in camp to one of the top guys, Mims would be getting top 3 reps on Sunday. That's how well I think he's played and earned that opportunity. And that's why when I hear, and we talked about this off the air about what we would want for Mims, and we both agreed a 4th rounder. And lo and behold, Joe Douglas said the reason basically that, or this is what people are saying, that the reason why Douglas did not trade Mims is because he wanted a 4th, no less than a 5th for Mims, which I completely agree with. You do not get rid of a guy that talented for a 6th or 7th round draft pick at this stage, early stages of his development, when he's had an injury and a COVID season, and just give up on him and give up a 6th round draft pick just because his agent wants him to get traded. So I'm glad Joe dug his heels in. And if there is an injury to one of your guys early on in the season, you have a guy that's capable of stepping in.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, they call Mims the 6th. I mean, he's really the 5th if you think about it,
Sure.
right? And from a talent perspective, if one of those guys go down, he is clearly the one that's going to step in if they go 4 wide, right? Right away.
Hope so. Yeah, not Jeff
you would
Smith.
hope so, especially what we saw over camp and the last couple of games of camp, where look, he was clearly on the borderline at one point in time, and look, give him a ton of credit because he put himself out there in a position where he had everything to lose by not playing well, right? The ultimatum, quote unquote, came out before the last preseason game, and then he went around and he had a big 3rd and 4th quarter and finished with 102 and a touchdown. So he bet on himself that he would prove the fact that he deserved to either be here or elsewhere, and he clearly would. Look, if they had put him on waivers, he clearly would have been snapped up immediately. But he bettered himself. He was able to maximize to a certain extent the talent that he has, which we hadn't seen, but it was enough to make him a 2nd round pick at one point in time. Now, look, he's behind 4 guys technically, but as we both said, unfortunately, as we saw last year, injuries happen, right? Davis got hurt last year. We had lots of guys. I mean, right. Elijah Moore lost several weeks. Yeah. If that happens, now you're actually putting in a guy who you probably have a bit of confidence in, knowing that you're not going to have a significant drop-off. You're going to have a drop-off in talent. You may not have a significant drop-off in talent as in years past.
By the way, I think what this tells us, though, remember, we thought there would be 5 receivers kept, not 6, is that Jeff Smith earned his roster spot. You know, they like Jeff Smith, and I think Jeff Smith is a nice little player. Don't get me wrong. He doesn't drop passes, but he doesn't have the size or the capability of being like a difference maker, but he's a nice little player. And again, you can't have more receiving talent with the injuries and so forth. So, you know, I think keeping Jeff Smith, it was good for him because, you know, he earned it. And he's not somebody that was drafted.
Nope, not at all.
Good going there. All right, now, we also talked about who needed a breakout season. We're still far away from that. But one of the guys was Becton.
Yep, we know where that went.
Quinnen Williams still has to prove himself that he is a star elite player this season. There is no more excuses because this is a loaded defensive line, which means he's not going to get all the attention. Nobody can go into this. If you're scheming with the Jets, you can't go, all right, we're going to double this guy or double that. Because if you double that guy, somebody else is going to go after you. So Quinnen Williams is going to have a chance. No excuses. Stay healthy, first of all. Secondly, I want to see him dominate. Not Aaron Donald dominate, but dominate like a top 10 interior defensive lineman.
Look, he wants the big bucks. I mean, that's clearly what he wants. And this is the year where he needs to do it in order to get that big buck salary contract. And like you said, you have John Franklin Myers. You have Carl Lawson coming back. We saw what Clemens could do because Lord knows that boy can close on the outside that we saw, right? That guy can clearly close, and he's got bad intentions when he's rushing the quarterback because we saw what he did to Taylor when he hit him. You look at the line in terms of the Sheldon Rankins. There's a lots of guys that are going to rotate, but if you line up your top four, double Williams, that may leave Lawson.
Well, they're not going to do that. If anybody gets doubled, do you think it would be Lawson?
You double Lawson, you may leave Williams one-on-one. You focus both guys. You may have Clemens coming on the outside from the other side. So there's clearly options now that did not exist in years past. Which Williams, as we said, I think the Jets have no qualms giving him that big deal, presuming he earns it. But now it's up to him to actually show he deserves it.
We also, and by the way, speaking of the defensive line, it'll be interesting to see who gets the most reps opposite Lawson. I mean, we might see Franklin Myers early on downs where they think it's going to be a run play on the outside. That's possible. But you're going to see Jermaine Johnson, Bryce Huff, Jacob Martin, and Michael Clemens. That's going to be interesting to see. Do they all share in it equally? Or does somebody end up, after a few games as the actual number one guy opposite Lawson on the edge? We'll see.
And you wonder if they're going to change schemes, right? Because we talked about the linebackers, right? Mosley's clearly going to be on the field all the time, right? Quan Alexander is going to be on the field all the time. You could see a lot of 5-2 sets where you use Clemens as your outside rush linebacker to try to create additional pressure, which you put him on the outside, and then you really got to figure out who you're blocking and who you're doubling because that speed could get to the quarterback quickly if you have him on one end and Lawson on the other.
Yeah, a lot of it, again, mostly you're going to want, and again, what you probably have to think about doing at that point is, because mostly teams are going to play minimum 5 DBs on passing downs, is you're going to have to, again, like you said, if that's the case, then it's probably just CJ Mosley and 5 linemen. That's probably what you're doing. And that's okay. Because look, we talked about it. We were going down cut day, is that there are not going to be a lot of linebackers. And I've been talking about this for the last year or two, ever since Saleh came here, is that this is about the defensive line. Forget linebackers. They don't play a big role in Saleh's defense. They're going to have a couple of guys, but the traditional 4-3, it's just not that important for Saleh. He wants to have the best guys, especially up front, and he's got them. All right. Speaking of breakout players, we also said man at punter, keeping in mind that last year in 10 games, he improved from the year before in average from 43.9 to 45.7, and he improved net 37.2 to 40.6. So he improved last year. Now we want him to take a bigger step. We want him to become a top 10 punter in the NFL. And Ashton Davis, he was somebody that we said definitely had to have a breakout year. We've seen him playing with the backups during the entire camp. So there was some speculation about maybe does Ashton Davis even make the team, because we just haven't seen him with the top guys. But because he's been around for a few years, because he's had, to me, I think he's just like Mims. I think he's had his share of injuries. He hasn't been able to kind of get out there for all 17 games now. And I want to see what he can do over a 17-game season, and I believe the Jets want that as well. And I think what they like about Davis is he can do a myriad of things in coverage, and I think that's important. But now he has to start making plays.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about the secondary, right? I mean, obviously the big one was Jason Pinnock, whether or not he would go.
That was a surprise, yeah.
Them keeping Davis for one and a couple other guys over Pinnock, to me, did come as a fairly significant surprise. I mean, Parks was one of those guys we thought might get kept. Passed all the way through, ended up in the practice squad, which I think they were exceedingly happy about, right? Tony Adams was another one who we weren't sure what was going to happen with Adams also. Pinnock was one I really thought they would try to keep because I thought he had a solid enough camp and had shown enough signs over the last couple of years that they would end up keeping him. Look, not surprising that he got snapped up right away. Good for him that he basically didn't have to relocate, which his family had talked about, right? They just changing the green to the blue and they don't really have to relocate. But that was one of those I thought that to me, look, if I was keeping one of the two, and given what we have seen to date, now granted, we don't know the viewpoint on the potential because clearly they view Davis as having greater potential than Pinnock. I'm not sure necessarily if what we've seen, I agree 100% with that, but that may have been that final coin flip as to which one of the two they keep. Do they try to put Davis and waive him and see if he makes it to the practice squad, or Pinnock? They took the risk with Pinnock, and it came back potentially to burn him a little bit because he was claimed by the Giants. So
I think they knew that was
one
going to
for
happen.
me.
No, there was no way Pinnock was not going to be able to. Come on, I think they knew it.
No,
they knew it.
What I'm saying is, if you had asked me which one of the two would I have kept based upon what we have seen, I likely would have kept Pinnock over Davis. That's just my personal opinion, which I told you when we chatted by text the day of cutdowns that I was a bit surprised at that one.
Hopefully they made the right call. And by the way, with Parks, this is an example, in my opinion, this is an example of one of two things. One, don't always trust what you hear about a player in camp, because again, it's not what the reporters are telling you what's going on with a player, what the coaches believe. And Will Parks is on his 6th team. He's only been around for a few years. That tells you something. Doesn't mean that he's not going to eventually find a spot somewhere because he's on the practice squad. And maybe he becomes a player by the end of the year. But that's the reason. You don't keep a guy like Will Parks, a journeyman basically, over a guy that you drafted who hasn't been able to prove himself in his 3rd season. I just don't do that. So, but Ashton Davis, this is it. I don't think there's any question. I mean, he has one more year left, and that's it to prove himself.
Maybe one. I mean, maybe he doesn't show anything during the year, and somebody else becomes available.
Don't get hurt.
Well, and also if he doesn't show anything during the year and somebody else becomes available, it's like, well, thank you very much, but we're going to go another direction because your stature here is tenuous.
Parks is actually the only, besides Craig James, Parks is really the only legitimate defensive back on the practice squad. So that's a little iffy there. Hopefully there aren't any major injuries. Okay, rounding out as far as the rest of the team is concerned, the offensive line, I was a little bit surprised only 3 guys made it. But that's where you had to juggle. And because of that, that's why maybe you have a 6th receiver and so forth. Herbig, Mitchell, and Feeney. So one thing's for sure, they better not have any injuries at tackle.
For sure.
I don't want to see Max Mitchell out there.
Well, I mean, they seem relatively high on Max Mitchell now, again, part of that could just be hype.
Well,
right?
It could be next year.
But from the comments we heard, they like what they have seen out of him so far. Is he ready to play? No, which is why they went out and got Brown pretty quickly. And the other guy they were talking about, supposedly, was Jason Peters, who signed to as a practice squad player today for the Cowboys, was another guy they had talked about originally if they didn't get Brown. So there's not a lot of depth that's out there floating in free agency if it's needed. So
Jason Peters, what is that guy, like 380 and 40 years old? Thank goodness
he is 40 years old. But there's not a lot of depth. You have to hope that, first of all, look, there's always going to be injuries. Hopefully that one of these guys, A, it's not a major injury, and B, that one of these guys can fill in at least temporarily until whoever's out comes back. Yep. If you have a material injury, clearly, as we know, that would be a huge loss, especially with Becton gone for the year.
The bottom line is they cannot look. The Jets are not good enough to have those types of injuries. If Brown goes down for a significant amount of time, or Fant, the Jets are in just big time. They're just not capable right now. All right, so also as far as the defense is concerned, or really overall as far as the team is concerned, taking a look at the practice squad, Jonathan Marshall was re-signed, so he didn't make the team. And again, that's a numbers game. Were you surprised Marshall made the regular? Shepard made the regular roster over Marshall.
A little bit. I mean, again, look, it worked out in the end, right? If Marshall had made it, you may have gotten Shepard on the practice squad. So I would say that Shepard's probably, not necessarily in the most comfortable positions. I think his name is written in pencil, not pen, at this point in time.
Yeah, he might have. He's got to actually. He may not even be out.
I'd be renting, not buying. Let's put it that way.
What's that?
I'd be renting, not buying at this point in time.
As far as Ane had a very good preseason.
Yep.
It's good that he made the practice squad, but again, it's tough to make this team when you have 10 defensive linemen. 10. It's just tough without injuries, but injuries occur. And then what's up with what did they do with Curry? So Curry's on injured reserve, so he's out for at least the first 4 weeks.
Correct. Okay. Yep. He just got placed on it.
He's the only significant player besides Becton, of course, that's on injured reserve. Okay.
Yep.
Meanwhile, the receivers to keep an eye on a practice squad. And I'm just going to quickly here, as we have a couple minutes left before we wrap this up. I'm going to pop up the R Lads. This is the R Lads depth chart. We could find obviously at rlads.com. So this is the Jets here, and you go all the way down to the practice squad, and you got Calvin Jackson. You have
who also had a good camp,
and Irvin Charles and Tarek Black. But the guy that really did stand out was Calvin Jackson, and he was never going to make this team as loaded as the receivers are. But that's an interesting kid to keep an eye on. Maybe not this year, but maybe he makes the team next year.
Yep, Jackson and Anaya, the two guys I think we both talked about that we were hoping would slide and make it through to the practice squad. But again, just because they're at the practice squad doesn't mean that somebody can't sign them off the squad if there's a opening that exists. So,
and then the only other Herman's made the practice squad as well. So that's your offensive tackle depth. Chris Treveler did make the practice squad, so good for him. Everybody's happy to see that. That was the best thing because he was never making the team. So the fact that nobody picked him up, excellent, great. He's around the team. That's great. And then also Chaz Surratt is the one interesting name that nobody's really heard of here. This is a kid that was a former quarterback, transitioned to linebacker, and because he did that late, he had a phenomenal last season at North Carolina. Somebody to keep an eye on because, again, when you're taking a look at players that make those transitions, it takes a while. So I would keep an eye on Chaz Surratt. Very good athlete. Maybe somebody we see down the line. But other than that, everybody else on the practice squad is a name that pretty much everybody is familiar with, including DQ Thomas, who made the practice squad. I think the only guy who is not familiar is Chris Glazer and Craig James. Those are the only two guys that we've never really heard of before with the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, look, the two guys we both talked about was Anaya and Jackson. I was hoping Streveler had made the team given the kind of camp he had. Knew he wasn't going to make the roster, but, good for him. Gets a spot on the practice squad. And look, I think Mike White's spot is not necessarily secure in any stretch of the imagination. Good for him. He had the, the moment in the sun last year and then came crashing back to earth relatively quickly. Now comes the fun part. Do we see Zach Wilson week 1, which I would say is doubtful at best? I have a feeling we probably get Flacco this week. I'd be pretty surprised if Wilson. I'll say between questionable and doubtful. Let's put it that way.
I really thought a week ago or 10 days ago, last time we spoke, I thought it was like definitely doubtful. Now I'm questionable. I'm like 50-50. I think there's something in Salah when he's talking it's I don't know. I think it's a possibility. And after Flacco looked the other day, let's get Zach Wilson. If somebody's going to throw interceptions, let it be Zach. At least he'll learn on the job. But hey, you know what? Maybe this is what Zach needed. He was injured last year, and what did he do when he came back? He looked a lot better.
He was.
So, and
you don't necessarily want to keep having that happen, though.
And the expectations of the team also is amazing how quickly. As soon as Zach went down with the injury, you looked at the national media and everybody thought, Joe Douglas, is his job on the line? It was just insane ridiculousness with the national media when Zach Wilson went down. Like it was like the Jets were going to be drafting a quarterback again next year in the draft. It was absolute idiocy. Anyway, prediction on the season.
7-10.
7-10. Okay, so that's how many more wins from last year?
1 over last year. 7-10, 8-9. I think we'll see improvement. Whether or not that's going to be reflected in the record, 7-10, 8-9 is probably what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah. Okay. I say 8-9, 8-9, 9-8. That's what I'm going to go with. So we're pretty close. Okay. How many wins did they have last year?
6. I thought. What? No, was it?
No, it was less than that.
4.
I think 4.
4 and 13. Yeah. So 2 to 3 more wins this year is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, we were just bad, so it doesn't really matter what the record was. But I think I think we'll definitely win at least. I think we could double definitely our win total this year.
Okay.
Which means 8 wins, something like that, 8 or 9 wins. All right, Jan, we'll talk to you again after the Baltimore game. Are you going?
Don't know yet. Up in the air.
All right. Well, thanks for taking your Labor Day to talk Jet football with us, and can't wait to talk regular season football when we talk next week, either Sunday or Monday. Not sure when we're doing it, but we'll figure it out.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.